This has been a process. For those of you who are involved in the writing or publishing world, you know the ups and downs that come along with writing and publishing a book. I'll introduce myself. My name is Anne O'Connell. I'm the president and founder of OC Publishing and Mark's partner in publishing Indonesia's Big Bang. I also want to recognize that Mark's editor on the project, John Taptree, is with us today. Thank you so much for joining us and for all your work on the project. It really does take a team to bring this kind of a thing together. And we have an amazing designer that we work with in Wolfville. His name is David Edelstein. So I would like to give a little shout out to David. I think you'll agree the cover is absolutely beautiful. And Mark can attest to, what goes into all of the ins and outs of that. So it's my very, very great pleasure to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Mark Gilbert, who I always ask him if it's okay if I say this. We met in my sister's yoga class many, many moons ago. And I also like to thank the people who make referrals. And our friend Bob here was the one who kind of brought it full circle. They were chatting one day and he said, Mark says to him, I've got this book, that I have in mind. I don't really know what to do. And he said, well, Anne, Sue's sister, she's a publisher now. And every time I hear that, I go, I am. Okay. So we had coffee, a year and a half ago, maybe? And then the rest, as they say, is history. So you are here because you know and love Mark. So I'm just going to give just a little introduction because, he's a very modest person, very humble. So I'm going to wax lyrical. Mark Gilbert's career as a local government specialist included work as a practitioner, an international consultant, and an academic. Highlights included 12 years as CEO of a provincial crown corporation, 2 years as a financial advisor on a post-apartheid local government capacity building project in South Africa, a 20-year involvement in public sector reform in Indonesia, and a professorship at Dalhousie University. Dr. Gilbert holds an MBA and PhD and has published articles in academic journals and professional association publications. He has traveled extensively throughout the Indonesia archipelago and feels at home here. He lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And just a quick note before I hand the mic over to Mark is for the folks that are joining us on Zoom, how exciting is that? Like this is also the first time that I've attempted to do this. So I'm very relieved and pleased that this has come together. So welcome those of you who are joining us remotely. Turn on your video if you want to be seen, if you want Mark to see your lovely faces. Keep your mics on mute, but when we get to the Q&A, please feel free to join in when we open to the audience for questions. I'll watch for hands raising on the screen. So for now, I'm going to hand the show over to Mark Gilbert.
Can I just say you're very faint? I'm finding it very difficult to hear what you're saying.
Well, thank you, Anne, for the introduction and for all the hard work that you've done in making this book a reality, along with John Taptree as well. The thing that was interesting about putting this book together and being here today is that so many of you actually have been involved in it in one way or another. Some of you have actually come to Indonesia with me on various missions that we've had, and others have met Indonesian delegates when they've been here. And one night when we were trying to figure out what the best cover option was, the trail running group that I belong to were the focus group when we went for a bite to eat afterwards. That's one of the reasons that we're also pleased with the cover. The passage that I'm going to read today, the project itself ran for a period of 20 years. And it starts at the beginning of the first phase because we got our money on our side from CEDA, from the federal government, Canadian International Development Agency. And what they did is they would approve the project for so many years at a time. So the first time it was 3 years and the others were anywhere from 3 to 5. And the portion that I'm going to read, and it's critical to the story in a way, because it was what made a big change in the work we did, because we started out working with them on what they called administrative decentralization, because they wanted to join the global economy and become more competitive. And to do that, they had to improve some of their government practices and regulations, and that's an area that we had some experience with. But then 3 years on, there was an Asian financial crisis, and that resulted in a big change in governance in Indonesia, which obviously had a big impact on the type of work that we did together, and also accelerated the effort. So the portion that I'm going to read, the excerpt from the book, is around that time.
A little louder, Mark.
Pardon?
A little louder.
A little louder, okay. So basically, it's going to cover three things. It's on page 69 for those of you that want to read along. And one is basically looking at where we were before the Asian financial crisis, what happened during that crisis, and then what it meant for the project afterwards. And if the lighting gets a little dim for me, I'm going to take a break and put on some reading glasses, but right now I think I'm okay. Okay. So the sound is better now?
Let us know if the sound's better. Yeah.
Okay. So the next phase of our cooperation was arranged through a 3-year international cooperation agreement between IPAC, that's the Institute of Public Administration of Canada, the Canadian International Development Agency, and the goal of the agreement, as it related to the Indonesia, IPAC, and Nova Scotia cooperation, was to support Indonesian government initiatives on decentralization, public sector reform, and capacity building. Our partnership emphasized sharing knowledge and experience in the area of administrative decentralization, supporting Indonesia in improving public services, and building a long-term relationship. Our Indonesian colleagues asked us to work with them on improving local government enterprise management. That's where Blaine Rooney came in, local government finance, good governance, and public sector training and education. As the decentralization effort gained momentum, the need for different kinds of Canadian expertise increased. Our mission teams went from the same individuals in the early planning stage years to including others with specific knowledge or skills related to the individual projects. Our program was peer-to-peer, and priority areas of cooperation were still determined by Indonesia's Department of Home Affairs. I expected the activities of the 3-year agreement would follow the pattern we had already established by expanding our work in existing areas and adding others where we could make administrative improvements to streamline processes or provide services. It didn't work out that way at all. This period saw the first major political change since President Suharto took control and became Indonesia's second president 30 years earlier. Indonesia faced an economic crisis, and as a result, there were changes in government leadership and policy direction. This included opening the door to political reform and decentralization. These changes were triggered by the Asian financial crisis, and I see we have Roy Spence in our audience here today, who's a finance expert who probably could expand on this, but I'll keep it brief, Roy. And that Agung had expressed in his concerns about the economies of Southeast Asia were dependent on exports and foreign investment, and the countries there needed US dollars to meet their financial obligations. When the United States increased its interest rate, the American dollar appreciated, as did the currencies linked to it. The Thai baht was one of them. When it severed its link with the dollar, the currency devalued, the resulting capital outflowing of the country, and later the region, including Indonesia, which had a large US dollar denominated debt. The International Monetary Fund intervened and ended the crisis by providing loans to stabilize the economies that were impacted. As this was unfolding, in keeping with past practice, Suharto was re-elected president for another 5 years. This was his 7th term by the People's Consultative Assembly in March of 1998. Shortly after Suharto's re-election, the IMF, which was providing a bailout package, with set conditions, directed the Indonesian government to cut fuel subsidies. It did so on May 4th, 1998. Later that day, students responded by rioting in Medan, Sumatra's largest city. On May 12th, students protested in Jakarta, and 4 of them were killed by security forces. Non-student mobs ran amok in Jakarta, looting and destroying property, hotels, shops, banks, homes. Glodok, the commercial heart of Jakarta's Chinatown, was one of the areas targeted. Except for guarding large hotels and a few Western chains, security forces made no attempt to subdue the mob. President Suharto returned from a group of 15 summit meeting in Cairo on the 14th of May, and order was restored by the army. Protests continued, and a few days later, demonstrators arrived at the Indonesian parliament. Suharto resigned as president on May 21st and was replaced by Vice President Habibie. President Habibie instituted a number of democratic reforms that showed greater media freedom, the formation of new political parties, and the release of political prisoners. He endorsed decentralization and promised regional and local autonomy to empower provincial, city, and county governments. 2 provinces, Aceh and Irian Jaya, which is now called Papua, were granted special autonomy status in the area of governance and fiscal policy. The economy improved, but the rupiah remained weak. The political and economic fallout from the Asian financial crisis impacted our project in 2 ways. The first is that it opened the door for us to cooperate on political reform. Up till now, our mandate was solely related to administrative decentralization by encouraging more efficiency in service delivery through initiatives like one-stop shops and local government enterprise management. Going forward, we could also work with Home Affairs in implementing political reforms. This would require training for elected officials from local governments with new responsibilities and accountabilities, such as meeting established service standards and evaluating service delivery options. More major changes were coming, and IPAC, Nova Scotia, and I all wanted to be part of it.
Thanks, Mark. That gives you a little taste of what Inside Indonesia's Big Bang will bring to you. There's lots of stories of culture clash and overcoming these obstacles. So I think that you're really going to enjoy the read. But in the meantime, we're going to shake things up a little bit. And we have a very special guest who will be directing some Q&As before we open the floor to questions. So our special guest is Dr. Meredith Ralston, who has been a professor of women's studies and political studies at Mount St. Vincent University, my alma mater, for over 30 years, and has been involved in 2 international development projects, a 9-year CETA-funded project in the Philippines on sex tourism, and a 4-year project in the Gambia on community-based policing. She has written 3 books, including one on her experiences in the Philippines, and her latest book, Slut Shaming, Whorephobia, and the Unfinished Sexual Revolution, that's a mouthful, examines the common denominators between the Me Too movement and the myths of rape culture. She is also a documentary filmmaker whose films include Hope in Heaven, Selling Sex, Wendy Lill, Playwright in Parliament, and Why Women Run. So I have a feeling that this is going to be a lively Q&A. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Meredith Ralston.
Thank you very much for having me, Mark. This is so funny. I've known Mark for an awful long time, and I'm honored to be here. I am. I've loved reading the book, and I wanted to say that it's a combination of a travelogue. Actually, it was not what I expected at all. What I expected was a bit of what you just heard in terms of the project, which is obviously very, very important. But it's also about, it's a memoir, it is a travelogue, and it's also like a fish out of water story. So I can't tell you how many times I was reading it and went, oh, that explains, that explains things. Just for instance, the singing lessons, like I knew you took singing lessons in your retirement. Never occurred to me that there was another purpose to the singing except for, wow, you're in retirement, you're doing fun things. And it turns out that the Indonesians, like the Filipinos, love karaoke, singing, dancing, and Mark wanted to be a part of that. So one of the stories is about him getting prepared to sing in public, and unfortunately, I don't think you ever did get to do that. So I was gonna say, well, maybe you could sing today. I won't make you do that, although I did think what else.
That sounds awesome.
I think, yeah.
Okay,
They-
really close.
Just they can't hear online.
Yeah.
Very, very so.
It's not on.
It's not on. It's not on.
It's on.
It was on. Hang on. Turn on. Anyone back there?
Oh, that's the old hard part.
Meredith, while Ann is looking for that, getting back to the singing topic, John Dalton is with us today. He's in the second row here. And John ran for years the Big Life Cafe. And on Wednesday nights, he had open mic night. So I prepared to take the Indonesians there one year.
Yeah.
And when we got there, I was going to sing Farewell to Nova Scotia. But John, when it was his turn to perform, he said, I am so tired of hearing that song.
John?
John has the hat here.
It's you. That's funny, because that is in the book, that anecdote of why he in the end did not sing. So as I say, the travelogue aspect of it, I thought was very, very interesting because I have been to Southeast Asia. I've never been to Indonesia though. And it made me, I got to go to Indonesia. You really captured the I think, since I've never been there, but the place, the climate, you feel like you're there. The food, the description, if anyone's interested in history and culture, there's lots there. The memoir part and the fish out of water, I thought was very interesting too, for your questions. And the questions are coming. Because, you know, I see you as a very self-controlled person. And you're quite vulnerable. You're quite vulnerable in the book, which I loved, in terms of your own, what I would say is a character arc. So there's a character arc in the project, there's a character arc in Indonesia itself, there's a character arc for Dr. Gilbert. And so I thought that was really, really exciting about the book because you are able to talk about how things change for you because of this 20-year project. And so I wanted to talk, if you could speak just a little bit about how did you remember the details? This is 20 years of a project. You knew where you went for dinner. You knew what food you had. The people. I remember the dates of the project. You know, my project from 2004 to whatever it was. I can't even tell you the dates. But I'm just very curious about your writing process. About were you thinking at the time that you were going to write a book, and how did you remember all this? First question.
The remembering part was a combination of a lot of things. And the first time we went over in 1994, I'd never been to Southeast Asia or any part of Asia before. And it was just all so new and exciting that I kept notes every day, half a paragraph at the end of the day type of thing, what the highlights were. And I did that for a few years and then got busy with other things and stopped taking those notes. But by this time, we were having more formal missions and things were documented a lot better. So I had something to go back to in terms of a lot of the documentation. So that was quite helpful. And then there were a lot of reports that were written as well, in addition to the missions, just about the project and what the goals and objectives were and how they were going to be measured. One thing that was really challenging with the project was that CETA really wanted a lot of information on a frequent basis. And it was difficult at the time to find the time to do it, but it was helpful for something like this. So that was part of it. And the other thing too is when I started to think about writing the book, I contacted other people who'd been involved with the project, and they had a lot of information to share as well. So that was good. But the book itself, it started out as a COVID project, and it was just a matter, I thought, we've been at this project for a long time. It's 20 years. People have been pleased with it. It's something worth documenting, and nobody else on the Canadian side had been involved all the way through. So I thought I'll do it. And it was just a matter of putting it down in chronological order. And that part was fairly straightforward. And then once I got it there, I thought, this could actually work into something else. And my daughter had just completed her MFA in writing, so that was inspirational for me as well. So I thought I'll try and take it to the next step. And through you, actually, Meredith, I was put in contact with a fellow by the name of the late Burris Devaney, who had written 2 books, very similar to what I wanted to write. So I approached him, and he very graciously agreed to have a look at the first draft. And it came back with an incredible amount of red ink, but a lot of very positive observations. So then things just went from there.
Yeah, no, I said the level of detail is really impressive. The writing, I will look over at Mr. Tattry, maybe there was some help there. A lot of help. But the editor was very, very good too. So and when you mentioned CETA, as I was reading it, because I had a CETA funded project as well, it made me sad actually that we don't have CETA anymore, that there's almost an ideological, we should not be going to other countries, we should not be interfering in other countries. And I wondered what you thought of, given how much change, both in Indonesia through the project, through the people that you met, would you advocate for a similar project today? And what kind of lessons did you learn?
Thanks, that's a very relevant question. When I'm in touch with people in Indonesia, and I went back about a year ago to, part of it was social, but the other part was to tie up some loose ends for the book. A lot of people I met said, we would really like to get our cooperation going again. And, we'll work on it on our end, and you see what you could do on yours. But there basically was no opportunity in Canada for us to do that, because IPAC had been, basically they weren't doing international work anymore because of the lack of funding. But one of the things I think that would still make it relevant today is the fact that it was peer-to-peer, and it was civil servants working with civil servants. So there's no hierarchy. It's fairly low cost compared to other programs. And the host country, in this case Indonesia, they get to set the priorities, and they're quite flexible. And one thing I think that really helped is that the missions, and you look in the back of the book and you'll see they were about equal number in each direction, really helped with the buy-in on the Indonesian side, because people came sometimes in small groups, sometimes in large groups like 30 or 40, and they had an opportunity basically to experience Canada and see how things were done. And I think for any of us too, if we're going to be involved in a project, we want some personal reward as well as some professional reward, and that provided for that as well.
I mean, 20 years is a long time. I really cannot imagine how you kept that going. So I'm wondering what you think, what do you think made it successful? And that you obviously kept getting grants, and that you kept it going both on the professional and the personal level.
It's interesting. It was the Nova Scotia Indonesia project was only one of the projects that IPAC managed. They had 6 or 8 others. There was one in the Philippines, in several African countries as well. And so they were always able to have good working relationship with CETA, which really helped all the programs. And I think one of the reasons we were able to carry on in Indonesia was that they went through such a dramatic change with their Big Bang that they really needed some help. And we built a relationship with them by that time, that they were comfortable working with us. And something else that really helped too was the fact that we had some people that were involved, if not from beginning to end, for long periods of time. And then you build those relationships. At first, language was a bit of an issue, and it's hard to build a relationship with someone if you don't speak the same language. But as time went on, more and more people that from senior positions spoke English because our Indonesians was very low.
You tried though.
We tried, yeah, we did, yeah, so.
That kind of goes to the ARC issue again. As you say, when you began, very few people spoke English. There's a number of times in the book where you're referring to something that happened at the beginning of the project, like, you know, and it happened to me in the Philippines as well. You know, you're walking down the street and somebody's walks with you, hello, mister, in your case, not, hello, mister, and, you know, you had certain assumptions about what they were doing, and they got upset when you thought badly of them, if you will. And I think, again, that's another good example of you being vulnerable, to say, you know, he wasn't a beggar, he gets tears in his eyes, you know, you really feel bad for him, and you feel bad for Mark's reaction to it as well, because you just felt terrible. So at the beginning of the project, you have more of that. At the end, you're not getting the hello, mister, this white, you know, middle-aged man, maybe more of a novelty back in the day. Like, what do you attribute to the change?
I think there were a couple of things that caused the change. One was smartphones and people being more open to the world through them, where when we went in 1994, that wasn't the case. There were just these hand phones with special ringtones on them, and that was about it. And the other thing was globalization, just be more open to the world. But I must say I missed that early time because there was more foreignness in it, which in some ways made it more interesting. And now to go to Indonesia, you know, if you go to the shopping malls, if you go to the restaurants, if you go to the hotels, it doesn't feel a lot different from being here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Can you just tell everybody, why did you call it a Big Bang?
That was a term that the Indonesians themselves used for it. They had two terms that were used a lot. One was the grand design for what they were going to do as a result of the Big Bang. And the reason they referred to that is because basically a lot of the legislation and direction were put in place before the regulation and capacity was there to match them. And therefore it was like the big explosion, and okay, now we have to start picking up the pieces and put it all back together again, and hence the Big Bang. Yeah.
There are two significant, other than Lee's, of course, two significant women in the project that you worked on for many years, and I won't, there's a spoiler alert about, unfortunately, and I found that very touching, what happens to both of them, and your descriptions of the part they played in the book, and then they passed away. The fact that they're women doesn't mean that it was a feminist project by any means, but what were there gender or equity issues in the project at all?
There were some, because that was one of Sue's priorities, especially in the later iterations of our project. And there was someone who came down from Ottawa on one occasion and had a workshop for the Indonesian group when they were here along with us on gender issues. There was always a record kept when it came to our activities, is the percentage of participants by gender. And there was quite a bit of emphasis, because we did some financial work with them on budgeting, about maternal health issues in the budget itself. So there was some emphasis on it, but it certainly was not the main part of the project. Yeah, yeah.
Knowing the CETA always wanted some sort of gender component to the projects. So the book is, as I say, kind of a combination of the policy analysis and the memoir. How did those personal relationships, again, I was very moved at the end of the book, a beautiful ending, because it's talking about a 30-year friendship with, and I'm going to say his name wrong, Egun from Meredith. So, you know, it's a 30-year friendship that you had. It was a very touching ending for that. So how did those personal relations shape the reforms and what you actually did with the policy?
It was the personal relationships that really kept the project going, because at first it was hard to communicate between missions because we didn't have email or anything like that. It was all done by phone with a 12-hour time difference and fax. But by establishing some relationships through the missions going back and forth with Ogun and with some of the others as well, it was enough just to keep the interest there and to push on both sides for things that we could work on and find things. And then, of course, once the momentum was built, it was that much easier just to keep things moving. And there were two people in Indonesia that were very instrumental in that. And one was Jeffrey Ong. He was the program officer at the Canadian Embassy. He was a native Indonesian. And he was there throughout the whole time, which was wonderful because he provided a lot of consistency and was very on the ball in terms of knowing what was going on. And the other was Agum, who you've already heard about. And he was involved with the project for the first 5 years directly. But after that, he always stayed in touch and did things behind the scenes. And when we were there, just to keep it moving forward and come up with some new initiatives. So it was, basically the dedication of those two individuals, along with myself, that kept things moving. And when it came to the project itself, we rely on each other a lot for information about what priorities were, how things were going. But then there was a lot of other published material too that was helpful, like reports through USAID and World Bank and other academic scholars that also provided some insights that were helpful, because people always don't tell you everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about the differences between, we talked a little bit about cultural differences. So the way Canadians work in the world, or assumptions, or we tend to be a little more individualistic rather than collective. What about those, did any of those ideas clash with what you were attempting to do or what they wanted you to do?
I think the biggest shock for us the first time we had on our first mission, when we went to our meetings and were exchanging information about each other's systems of governance, was the fact that the military was very present in Indonesia. They had a number of seats in parliament. They were allowed to run businesses on the side, and roles that were just, we'd never think possible in Canada. So that was one thing that was very different. The other thing too was that the political party that had been in place for years and years, it was called Golkar. Civil servants were required to be members of that party. And all the voting on election day was done at the government offices. So those were things that we weren't used to. They didn't quite seem free and fair. And then the other thing that was interesting, though, was the whole area of clean government, as they like to call it. And there have been issues over the years in Indonesia with, clean government, corruption, whatever. But then during the project, we had the issue with our sponsorship scandal. And that really gave us a black eye in terms of, being the ones that were the shining examples of good governance. But on the other hand, it improved our relationship with them some because it put us more on the same level. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a very good way to get at some of the issues with, the West going to the global South, although they're hardly the global South anymore, because, it showed that we don't have all the answers. This is, as you keep saying in the book, which I think is really important, this is a peer-to-peer relationship. So it wasn't Canada coming into Indonesia and telling them what to do. It was, what did they want and how could you help? And so I thought that, like, the Access Nova Scotia thing, how many years have I known about your project? And only when I read the book did I really understand what, in terms of decentralization, meant. And also the one-stop shopping. One-stop shopping, you know what I mean? One-stop access, like Access Nova Scotia. So can you just talk?
Maybe one more?
One more question, okay. I could keep going. I've only got a couple more. So let's go back to the character arc. And you talk about the Javanese way of self-control. And again, I'm thinking you're a fairly self-control person yourself. So can you just talk a little bit about how they influenced you and how, what an example of a way in which I'd like to be more like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because, the Javanese way is people being very calm and collected at all times. And I was fairly used to being that way in a professional setting. But when it came to personal settings, dealing in business sense with other people, the approach that I had acquired, and I don't think it was unusual for Nova Scotia, was to be more demanding and, if necessary, confrontational in situations if you didn't feel that things were being done the way they should be. And in Indonesia, I found if I would behave that way, the Indonesians, they wouldn't say anything, but they would just come along very quietly, smooth over the situation. And I found it kind of embarrassing, actually. Yeah. And, one case, there was a case where I was having trouble with my luggage because we were on escalators and the openings were narrow and things like that. And getting frustrated, and the goon just came behind me and picked up one of my suitcases and put it on his shoulder, and that was the end of it. There was another case when Lisa and I were at Borobudur Temple with Lily and Agu, and we were climbing up the temple steps. Agu and Lily had decided to stay behind, and when we came back down, there was a photographer there who had taken pictures of us, and we hadn't asked him to or anything like that. And then he wanted to sell them, and we didn't want to buy them, and he got quite upset, and then I got quite upset. And then Agun came along and just, I don't know just what he did, but everything was fine after that. So when you get embarrassed a few times, it makes you rethink things.
Yeah, no, I did think that was a very interesting lesson for sure. So we're gonna open it up to I was gonna say the class. This is not a class. Where am I? Any questions from the floor? Or Mark? It sounds like a lot of you have either been involved or.
Is there anybody on our Zoom that has questions? Just give me a wave. Okay, Ed, do you want to turn off your mic and ask us the question? Or,
Yeah, sure. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, congratulations, Mark. Well done, and greetings from Johannesburg. So I just want to ask Mark, I've spent a bit of time with you in Indonesia and quite a bit of time here in South Africa. And I'm just wondering, how do you compare Indonesia's Big Bang with some of the, I don't know, reforms that you may have noticed in post-apartheid South Africa?
Maybe if you move your
Thanks.
phone a little bit because you're not in the screen right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's better.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. That's a good question. And I must mention before I answer it too, that I do recognize you from the book, A Backpacker in Jakarta. We were there in 1998. But to get back to your question, I think in terms of planning and preparing, South Africa was much better prepared and for the reforms that they made. Obviously, there were issues with implementation and still are, but in terms of the practices they put in place and the legislation, the Municipal Government Finance Act that I was involved in, it was very detailed and everybody knew exactly what was expected of them. Where in the case in Indonesia, those regulations hadn't been put in place initially. And so they weren't nearly as able to prepare.
Thanks, Ed. And Stephen Peddle has a question. And there you go.
Yes, my understanding of the Big Bang was it had a lot to do with decentralization as well as deregulation of markets. So it seemed like a great idea at the time, but over the particularly recent years, it seems to have got lost. The current president, Prabowo, is very much against decentralization, I think, and even market reforms to some extent. They seem to be returning to the old Suharto mentality of more centralization and more regulation. Is that something you're familiar with? Just what is the trend now, and what is the continued support for decentralization, market reforms? Having said all this, it's now 30 years since I was in Indonesia, so I'm probably vastly out of date.
Steve, it's really good that you're able to join us. I know that you have spent a lot of time in Indonesia and also have Indonesian family members. I was there in Jakarta about a year ago. And I do follow, like you do, the news from Indonesia, but I can't comment to any extent on, from a personal point of view on how things are going. But one thing that was mentioned when I was there last time was that the reforms agenda was basically going to go a bit more slowly when it came to decentralization, because the new president had different priorities. One of them being the food program in schools and poverty reduction.
Mm.
Do we have any questions from the room? Anybody else on Zoom? Okay, wow, we covered a lot of ground.
Oh, it's me.
Oh, yes,
Okay,
please.
great. Probably more of a general question. But Mark, what was like the most difficult part of writing the book? Was it like either from a memory standpoint or from a personal standpoint? Like what part of the book was maybe the most difficult for you to actually get documented?
For those on, could you hear her? Just what part of the book was the most difficult process?
For me, it was trying to write like somebody who wanted to write a book that people would be interested in. Because my writing has always been government reports, academic journals, research papers, things like that. So it was quite a transition. And I must say, Burris was the first person that helped me by pointing out things that could change. And obviously, John Tatry made the book so much more readable than initially I had made it. Yeah.
Mark, is there a large Indonesian society in Nova Scotia? And are you in touch with them in any way as a result of your experiences?
There's a large Filipino group in Nova Scotia, as you're probably aware, but the Indonesian community has always been quite small. And in the late 90s, there were quite a few Indonesian students at St. Mary's. In fact, Lisa and I worked with one of them to take some language lessons at one point. But no, there doesn't seem to be a community here, or if there is, I haven't been able to connect with it.
Oh, fun fact,
Yes.
there's an Indonesian coffee shop on the boardwalk in Eastern Passage. Yeah, Fisherman's Cove.
Yeah.
And actually that guy he said there's a very small Indonesian community in Nova Scotia. And they apparently are the only restaurant, coffee shop.
You should sell books there.
But, well, I have been there, and it is one of the few places where you can get a really good cup of coffee and a really nice pastry or treat for $5. Yeah, just a fun fact.
I was gonna ask if you're still keeping, hi Mark, congratulations on the book. I was gonna ask about if you've kept up with your contacts there, but you kind of had a question about that. So I'm gonna ask you, what's your the memory from this incredible experience? What is the one that really touches you most, or is like the best memory from this project?
If I answer the question, I'll give away the ending of the book. So I'm gonna have to pass. No spoilers.
No spoilers.
Pardon?
Have you kept up with your contacts?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Yes, John.
I was gonna ask you, what was the food like for someone like yourself, traveling there as often as you did, and how did you enjoy it? And was it something that you prepare yourself now, or is it just, I'm curious as to, I'm not at all familiar with Indonesian food.
It's spicy. And over time, I've learned to like some of the dishes. And we do have Indonesian cookbooks at home that we've gone through periods where we've made the Indonesian food, but not recently. And the thing that was interesting about staying healthy in Indonesia was if you ate the hotel food in the hotels, usually it was, you were fine. But to eat some of the street food, it was difficult for us Westerners, because we just couldn't handle it as well as the locals. Yeah. but they liked the food at your place when we came over that night.
We still have time to mingle, and we'll say thank you so much for coming, and thank you for those joining us on Zoom. Excuse my back. And books are still for sale.
Yes.
Is he doing book signings?
Some books.
And yes, and Mark will be over at this table signing books. And thank you so much, Meredith, for your questions. That was amazing. I myself have been to Indonesia. This was a project that I absolutely loved, and it didn't matter how many times. And as an editor, anybody who's in the room who is an editor knows that you read it many, many, many times. I loved every time I read through it. I love Indonesian food. I've been to Jakarta a few times. I've been to Bali. So it really does resonate with me. So I have the pleasure of picking projects that I love. And fortunately, when my friend Mark came to me, it was a project that I really, really wanted to take on. So again, thank you. And thank you for being part of this project, John. And thank you all for your support. It has been incredible to see everybody turn out. And Mark, did you want to say any final words?
Thanks, Anne. I would like to thank everyone for coming today and being part of this event. For Meredith for asking some excellent questions. Scott had told me that he said, if you ask Meredith to do that, he said she'll dig deep. And she did. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
And he showed up, you know.
Well, there's something that looked familiar back there, yeah.
Being Lisbon.
That's right. And Anne, it's been a real pleasure working with you. You really live up to your philosophy of wanting to help people be their best selves. And John, of course, for the work that you've done, some big help. And Luann, I'm so glad you could come to here as a representative of you and Burris and be part of this. And to everyone else who's been part of the project, gone on missions and contributed and made it the project itself something that I think we're all quite proud of. And I guess that's about it. And Claire has, yes.
Yes.
Claire has made some social arrangement afterwards. Would you like to?
Oh, no, you.
Okay. Anyway, the Henry House are expecting a group from this launch for drinks and food afterwards. So, yeah. Good.
That's a good PM.
Oh, yes, thank you to all our Zoom guests as well.
There's messages coming through to thank everybody. Thank you. I will be stopping the recording now. Feel free to keep watching if you want. But thank you very much for coming.
Thanks so much, Barry. Yeah, I know this.